All right. Hey guys, Mr. Ridgway here. Make sure everything's been a while since I've recorded. I got to get everything kind of set back up again. We today are going to be looking at some of the more, transformational moments in all of human history. Probably the biggest one here, and that is the Neolithic Revolution. As you're soon going to see, it's the Neolithic Evolution. Then we'll also talk about human settlement. So there's a warm-up right here where it says class video. Go ahead and watch that. And then you'll go on to the next slide with me. What I'd like you to do, again, if you're doing this lesson on your own, again, you're going to have to kind of do some of these partner activities or group activities, as if you had somebody next to you. But after you watch that video, again, you just go back to that last slide, you click it. What do you see drawn on the walls, and what do you think that tells us about early humans? So go ahead, take a moment to watch that video, and then, again, pause this one and write down a few of your ideas before you keep going, okay? So I'm going to assume at this point that you have unpaused, you're done watching it, and you might have noticed several things. So I'm going to go ahead and point out some of the things that we do know from drawings like this, okay? Now, what I'd like you to do is over on the right-hand side, you can see here I've got all these terms, and you really only need to focus on the bolded, underlined ones. What I'd like you to do is to write some of these big ideas on the top of your notes, and you'll see there's an area there when we get to your notes here later where you can do that. What do we know from cave drawings like this? Well, we know a lot of things actually about early humans. First of all, we know that most humans, again, we're talking early humans, traveled in groups of about 20 to 150. There's something kind of magical about this 150 number. 150 is actually the number of friends that most people have on average. There's been a whole bunch of very odd things about this number. It's like the amount of, basically it's like the idea is it's the amount of friends that you can have at any one given time. We also know from pictures like these that although people probably stayed in caves, like the one you just saw in Lecaux, France, they probably moved around a lot. And so we know that they were nomadic. They moved from place to place. And when we get to our unit on migration, we'll actually talk about how human beings got to all the different places on Earth that they got to. It's an interesting story. So we get these, very, very long movements that happen over a long period of time. And human beings, if you don't know, originated in Africa. Now, religion-wise, you may have seen some of the figurines that they had there on the cave walls. And you saw probably lots of animals there, right? And one of the things we do know about early humans is that they practiced various forms of what we would today call animism. What's animism? It's easy to remember because it kind of looks like animal. It's the idea that everything has a spirit, but it's not just animals. It could be trees, rivers, rocks, those kind of things. Animism is a good example of what we have of what we call a polytheistic religion. It's the idea that there might be many gods, poly meaning many, and theism meaning belief. Food-wise, we're still talking about human beings hunting and gathering, and you saw that. You actually saw that in the cave. We could see, people hunting. Tech-wise, well, we know a bunch of things from people being that deep into cave systems. For example, we know that they must have had access to fire. Simply put, because you need light somewhere to be able to go and draw those kind of things, right? Stone tools, we're talking simple weapons. You saw some of those. And again, fire is the big one. Fire is so important. It allows us to cook our food. It allows us light and safety. Lots and lots of things. So again, just from caves like that, we can know lots of things about early human beings. So that being our warm-up, we are going to jump right into our mini lesson. But before I get to that, I want to talk about what kind of our objectives are for today, because I want to be as straight up with you as possible. So first, we're going to be describing some of the changes that came around because of something called the Neolithic evolution. It is probably the most important event in all of human history. I think safely I can probably say that. And then two, we're going to look at why human beings saw and also why we continue to see a need to live together. Lots of different answers that we can come up with here. So let's talk about the gnarly Neolithic revolution. You'll notice down here that there are your note outlines right there. The one with lines on it is going to be more of a fill in the blank. The one over here, again, is going to be kind of a more open-ended option, and you are welcome to use either one. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a moment here. So what we've been describing to, at least what we saw there in that warm-up, is a time of history that we call prehistory. Now, what does that mean? Prehistory is everything before the invention of writing. But prehistory actually gets itself broken up into two spots. The first period of prehistory we call the Paleolithic period. You don't need to necessarily know that. All that it means is that human beings at this point are hunting and they're gathering. And this is easy to remember if you've ever heard of things like the paleo diet. The paleo diet is things that you find naturally out in nature. Okay. But then we get this second period of prehistory called the Neolithic period. And you'll notice that's kind of the title of the mini lesson, right? Is the Neolithic evolution. And this occurred, we think about about 12,000 years ago. But there's something that causes us to switch between this Paleo period and then the Neolithic period right afterwards. And that's what the whole focus of today is. So, take a moment and think about what might cause that switch. What's the alternative of hunting and gathering, right? And the answer that you might come up with is, oh yeah, farming. Okay. So farming is by far the most important thing to ever happen to humanity, except for like maybe the internet. It is up there. Farming is revolutionary in terms of how fast it changes like life, but at the same time it takes a long time. So you can see up there that I crossed out the R. And that is because you'll see here, it's not like it all of a sudden you just snap and all of a sudden, farming happens. It's a little bit more complicated. So again, the Neolithic Revolution, what is this, or evolution rather, what does this refer to? It refers to the time when people, we start farming crops for the first time. And this is huge. We think this likely happened by accident, okay? Again, you can imagine like somebody taking like the trash they had and then throwing it out, and then later they notice something's growing there, right? Lots of things get invented by accident. But here's the reason why people did not switch to farming all at once. Farming, just like anything else, sometimes it is a lot of, one step forward, two steps back kind of thing. You might, for example, you plant crops, and as you are planting crops, you just can't simply all of a sudden stop hunting and gathering. You've got to wait for those crops to grow. And so, you're still going to have people who are needing things like protein and things like that. And then also, let's say that you grow a bunch of crops and they all die just because either you didn't figure out like an irrigation system well enough, or maybe some kind of disease happened. And so there is a lot of failure, and it takes a long time for people to be able to figure out how to get the farming thing going. The weird thing about farming that's really cool is that all across the world in different locations, even though places like Mesopotamia and places like the Nile were some of the earliest places where people started farming, people invented farming and discovered farming all over the world without talking to one another, which is just pretty cool. And it really is the most massive transformation in all of human history for reasons we're about to check out. So why is it so darn important? Well, we'll get to that here in a second. I thought I would show you this before going on in a picture that I totally did not sneak inside of a British museum. So I want you to realize, this kind of gives you some perspective with farming. So farming, if I had to put a dot on where farming was invented, okay? Farming, so we have here all the different versions of humans that have ever existed, going all the way back to what we think about 7 million years ago. We get the first kind of humans down here. And you can see here that as time goes on, we've not only had a lot of updates, okay, we've had some changes made that gets us to all the way up here, which is Homo sapiens, that's us. But also, you can realize how recent a discovery farming is. So if this is like 1 million years ago right here, literally farming was just discovered right here. It's literally that recent. It would be like if it were a clock, like 11:59 p.m. So farming is relatively recent, but at the same time, again, it takes us a long time to figure out, how things go. The cool thing I like about this as well is this, looking at things like evolution is like we can understand that eventually there's going to be some kind of model of human being that's going to replace us. Like, we're only like the iPhone 10. There's going to be, something after and something after and something after, which is kind of cool to think about. Okay, so what happens because of the Neolithic evolution? Why is this such a big deal? Let's kind of break it down kind of like in a nice step-by-step process. So the big change with the Neolithic evolution is all of a sudden people go from having to scavenge for their food, which is a pretty inconsistent way to get food. It kind of depends on sometimes luck and other things like that, to all of a sudden now consistent food production. Okay, and that's a big thing, like being in charge of your own food supply, and then that food's going to be there. But the thing is that all of a sudden now a whole bunch of factors come into play. Because let's go ahead with the idea that you start farming corn, right? You can't, for example, point number 2, you can't keep being nomadic. Like, one of the things you got to think about is protecting your food. And the corn don't walk unless you're playing like Plants vs. Zombies. So you got to start settling in villages, not only to keep food supplies safe, but also because like you've got to have a place to stay for a long time until the crops are done growing. Now there is something that happens, okay, when there is large food surpluses that occur at the same time that you have people staying in one location for a long time, and that is, in the words of John Green, they start scootily pooping. Okay, they do the sexy times, and all of a sudden, what you find is that with big food surpluses comes massive population growth. People start to make more of themselves when they know they have consistent food around, because that you can have more kids, right? The thing though is that once we start kind of down this line, like there's people are staying in villages now because we're planting crops, and there's more people, and there's population, there's all this population growth going on. Now all of a sudden, sometimes people don't get along, so we have to have the first governments that have to occur. Like, and especially like, for example, if some people are more successful at growing than others, we start to see the first social class differences start to emerge. Like people becoming, like, in some ways ranked higher than the other people around them. The point that we're eventually going to get to, which is where this kind of, all of this is heading, okay, and it's kind of like a snowball going downhill, right, is that you don't have to have everybody farming all the time, right? The corn just kind of sits there, like, at some point. And so this is really important because what it gives human beings is probably the most important resource of all besides food, and that's time. Time to invent dumb stuff like Pokemon Go, and it allows us to have, basically, because every morning I can not have to worry about going out to a field and killing a buffalo. That allows me to come to school and do teaching, right? What we call this, okay, the idea that people can do different jobs other than, just hunting and gathering all the time. We call this specialization of labor. The idea that, again, I can do something because I have the ability for other people to grow food while I do something else. Okay, that's specialization of labor. Specialization of labor is hugely important. On this chart right here is just showing you some other things about before and after the Neolithic Revolution. There's lots that we're going to talk about here, but we'll get to it later. The next part is something we're going to do in class, but you're more than welcome to try this by yourself. I'm not going to explain all the all the rules here because I'll do that in class, but it's right here if you want to try it on your own. There is an online version of this board game you can try. It's called 10,000 BCE. It's trying to help you understand some of the lessons that some of the points that we've been kind of appreciating in these last couple lessons, as well as hammer home some of the big things we just talked about with the Neolithic evolution. So those directions are there. There's an online version you can play, digital dice, digital board game. It's all there. You can check it out. I trust you. You are a smart person and can do so. The last thing that we're going to do in class is this. So now that we've had a chance to talk about the Neolithic evolution/revolution, we're going to take a moment and kind of do a little bit of bringing in the modern day in a sense, but also thinking about still back then. And we're going to do a brainstorm. Why did people settle together? So we're going to use something called Google Jamboard, and I will show you how to do this. We're going to be putting some ideas up on sticky notes. If you're doing this on your own, there's going to be 6 possible groups. It's okay. Feel free to go ahead and join any of the groups and add your own ideas. If you are adding ideas, and I'll say this to the people in class, please make sure that you tag your first name onto it, so I can give you credit for your ideas. I like to see what people come up with. So what you're going to do here, okay, is you're going to hop onto here, and you're going to see something that looks like this. It's just very, very simple. It says group 1, and then if I click the arrow up here, it says group 2, group 3, group 4, group 5, group 6, right? What you're going to do, okay, is you are going to come over here to the side and say click sticky note, and then you're going to write one of your ideas. And here's the brainstorm. Why did and do people settle together? So your reasons that you put down here are totally up to you. You could think about the modern day. You could think about people back then. I want you to be thinking about all the different things. And a good way to think about this is why do people today live in cities? And you can think about this from a psychological perspective. You can look at things that are cultural or social. You can look at political things. You can look at economic. There's lots of different options. And so as you begin again to post your ideas in here, I will take all these ideas in class, and we'll combine them into kind of a visual poster that will be hanging in the room from that point on. So once you do that, you're done with this lesson, and that's pretty much it. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.